Okay. So information gathering and vulnerability scanning. As always, I would attempt to give some perspective or give some context to the discussion, then we'll dive into the slides. This chapter is quite loaded. Unfortunately, we might not exhaust all of it, but then the bulk of the task is actually left to you to do. Since it's a self-paced course, I'm going to just be your guide through it. So this this is actually communicated as an approach to, gathering information that is needed for certain decisions. And in gathering the information that we need for the decisions, there are a lot of things that needs to be done, right? As far as cybersecurity is concerned, the goal here is to after suspecting that something might be happening in your in your scope or in your domain, whether it is with respect to your applications, user application, network applications, or web applications, whether it's the infrastructure, your services that are hosted on some devices, whether it's end device or the server themselves. There's a need to do some serious checking. Like if you suspect something is happening in the environment, what you want to do is to gather your information, right? And the information you're trying to gather is with respect to being able to just ascertain that this is what the problem is and then go ahead to solve it or solving it. Okay. So with respect to information gathering, another name for it, we did something about it the first day. Another name for it is a military term, or it's actually, yeah, military or intelligence term. It's called reconnaissance, more or less information gathering. Just being able to collect data or information from different sources. But then normally this information is about a specific target. This target could be a particular behavior, a software, whatever. But then you have a target, you suspect this target is perhaps nebulous or perhaps is suspect, right? You go ahead and begin to gather information about it, right? And this target could be a system, an organization, a group of people, right? Simply with the hope of perhaps attempting to understand the potential weaknesses that are inside of potential vulnerabilities. And the purpose of this is to just identify what assets exist. Remember, we're able to identify what an asset is. An asset is anything that is considered of value to the organization or to the entity, right? And then once you identify it, you want to also be able to tell how that asset is connected, right, to other assets or other infrastructure, right? And if it is connected, what are the potential entry points for a malicious person, or we can put it, a threat actor? Now, just the picture I want you to have in your head is imagine that somebody is wanting to break into your house, right? Typically, because the person is trying to do something that is not legal, the person will not be coming through the main door. Well, you'll be shocked. These days, some crooks want to come through the main door. Either which way, before they come into the house, whether through the main door, appearing as regular guys, or maybe through any other door, what they want to do is to go around that particular environment and identify the potential entry points: back door, front door, window, ceiling, right? Gate, whatever. And while they are doing this, they also want to find out which ones of all of these are weak. The part with the least resistance is what they might take. And this is actually, what's it called? Is actually, how do I put it now? Is relative, right? The part that has the least resistance is relative, depending on who is doing that and depending on what is happening. So things that they want to be finding are perhaps domains, there's web domains, IP addresses, the technology in use, which of the technologies, the ports that are available and perhaps are actually open or perhaps available, right? And all. Then for vulnerability scanning, simply definition is straightforward. It's just being able to scan the network. And this scan could be automated. This scan could happen actively or passively, right? Actively means that you engage in some form of aggressive approach using tools that could actually fetch some information for you. Let me also say this again, like I'll always say every now and then. We must understand that the architecture or the structure, I think architecture of the internet, of the network, as it were, with respect to engaging services and all, is actually built with a structure of client server, suggesting that someone would always make requests for a particular service, right? And someone would always be giving. So the server is the one giving or responding to requests made, and then the client is the one who always requesting. Of course, very basic. However, it is important because in understanding this conversation that exists between a client and a server, it helps you to focus more on the conversations that occur between them. These conversations now reveal a lot of information that are exchanged, which is usually the target of any attacker. So, as a pen tester, what you want to find out is how strong or how valid or how potent are these conversations? How protected are they? Right? So, vulnerability scanning is being able to just identify the weaknesses, particularly security weaknesses or structural weaknesses or program weaknesses that exist within a system, in a network, or applications, right? And more or less, this is done to just help identify any potential or detect potential risks that exist in a network. And this, why you need to do that is because this risk could be exploited, right, by whoever is the threat actor. The threat actor might be white guy, white hat guy, black hat guy, gray hat guy, and the rest of them, right? So in all of these things, you must identify that, you must know that there are things that need to be used, tools will need to be used, right? In the bid to do some information gathering and vulnerability scanning, you want to understand that there are things that need to be used. And then there are steps that need to be followed. The first of all, like I said earlier, is information gathering, which is mainly the reconnaissance, right? And then there are different types. There's passive, there's active, right? We'll use tools like your Whois or your Google, right? This is laying the foundation for what we're going to do. Once we dive into it, we just continue straight, right? So you could do things like social media scraping, right? These are things that can be handled. There are tools you can also use, tools like Nmap. I think we're going to use Nmap. I have it. We're going to look at how it works, some idea of how it operates, and you can explore going forward. You could use Ping, which is very regular service, right, or tool that exists within the TCP/IP stack, right? So you can do reconnaissance, and you can do that also by doing certain port scanning. The idea is to be able to, identify services that are running and that are active and that are responding to requests. Remember, I said the architecture of the internet is server client, right? So if somebody's attempting to reach a particular service, it's like somebody going to a shop. Now, for me to, okay, let me paint this picture. It just jumped into my head now. Imagine this is not like what we need to do, but it's like a picture, right? Please take it hypothetically. This is not me saying we should go to rob. Let's assume we want to rob a shop. The shop that we're going to rob must be a shop that is actually open, right? Open meaning that it is receiving client. So typically clients go to the shop to buy stuff. So we can case it and say, hey, people walk into the shop and this shop has two doors. There's one in front, there's one behind. Oh, they have CCTV cameras. How do we avoid all of these cameras? All of these are recon. We go ahead and just gather information. But for us to attack that particular shop, the shop can only be attacked, right, when it is open for business, when it is accepting client. Otherwise, any other action would be too expensive and too time consuming. Okay. So we have certain things like, so port scanning is one of such, where we identify one thing that is perhaps a tool that is able to tell us what ports are available. Then there's vulnerability scan, which is typically a point to detect potential security weakness within the architecture of your environment. So there are tools that can be used as well, right? What happened? Okay, I wanted to be sure. Somebody's asking a question. Okay. All right. So we're going to now dive straight into it now that we've been able to do some form of background introduction. Let's dive into it straight and see what happens. There is quite a number of things we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead. Now, these are the things we'll be looking at. Basically, the title is Information Gathering and Vulnerability Scanning. We're going to be the objective of the model is to perform informative gathering and vulnerability scanning activities. Now, of course, that's what we're going to be communicated. We're going to attempt doing one or two. First things we're looking at here is performing passive reconnaissance. Then we'll perform active reconnaissance. Then look at understanding the art of performing vulnerability scan, right? Then understand how to analyze these scans and their results. So hopefully we're able to achieve all of this today. So for passive scanning, let's dive into it. Now, as an overview, reconnaissance, which is more or less information gathering, is always the initial step in any cyber attack. Now, note, whether you are attacking or you are attempting to mimic an attack to tell the strength of the network in withstanding or withholding or withstanding any form of the attack, reconnaissance is very important. This is where you gather information. An attacker must first gather information about the target in order to be successful. So the term reconnaissance is widely used in the military world to describe the gathering of information about the enemy, right? Such as information about the enemy's location, that particular enemy's capabilities, and their movement. Now, it informs a lot, dates back to as far as when war started, or when we have people who protect places, from heavily mechanized guys to very local, traditional guys with their, axe and the rest of them. So the type of information is needed to successfully perform an attack, right? What are information? The location, the capabilities of that particular target, and then its movement or the operation, how they operate, right? This is with reference to military. Bringing it to our network environment or network environment or IT environment is more or less identifying services that are available, how those services interact, right, with each other. Is it a server client environment? Is it standalone? Is it peer-to-peer? And all of those. So it helps in structuring the attack tool, right? Because this reveals what we consider an attack surface. They were able to attack that surface with the tool that is generated or built specifically for it. Now, there are certain tools that are general, but most tools are actually specific for specific things, which is what makes this quite interesting. Now, reconnaissance in a penetration testing engagement typically consists of scanning and enumeration. What does that mean? It's simply saying we scan and then we identify or list out what we found. And all of these things would be listed in order of the place with the least resistance or the place with the high resistance, depending on how you want to do it. And that informs what your action is going to be. So what does reconnaissance look like from an attacker's perspective? Let's try to see. So if he's gathering intel, what exactly is he trying to gather? Or what is he gathering the intel for? Now, we have two types or two shades or flavors of reconnaissance. There's active and then there is the passive. Now, active is when you use tools, right? And those tools actually attempt to aggressively find out information. So what they use in their aggression or in their aggressive approach, they send some form of traffic that is supposed to be responded to. Now, please note, I said this earlier, very important to note. It might look like it's very basic, but it's very important and it helps to communicate our point. We must understand that this architecture of the network, of a network, is such that for the purposes of accessing services and having services given, server client. Now, whatever the service is, they all don't have the same structure of information exchange, right? They are different. Mails have their different exchange of information, FTP, different information, web application, web services, all of them have different response. However, there would be client requesting and server responding. So what are the information that they exchange within themselves? This is where active reconnaissance plays a role. It would structure the probe or structure a script or structure an application or a tool, right? To act as one wanting to perhaps interact with the service giving device. So what happens in this instance is that traffic that is being sent is referred to as a probe. So in this active reconnaissance, the method here is where information gathering in which the tools used send out probes to the target. The target could be network, system, and applications, whichever. But why? You are attempting to get the person to commit by responding. So in order to elicit responses that are then used to determine the posture of the network or the system. So it's like ping, for example. Typically, if I send a ping, the idea is that the ping is actually depending on how you structure it, you can actually tell that the datagram in the ping should be 1,000, 2,000, 20,000, depending. But to generate ping, the typical architecture of ping traffic being sent as a probe is that the ping usually goes at a target, the target is to respond. It's from the concept of sound travel in physics, where you have echo, right? Sound travels until it meets some form of obstacle. Then the obstacle, of course, causes that sound to reflect. Now, the argument is that the distance it travels, right, the time it will take for, let me put it this way, the distance covered, right, is proportional to the obstacle it faces, right? And that can also give us the time. So it's actually 2 over x, 2x over t, 2 times distance over time. So the farther it travels, or the farther the obstacle is, the farther it will travel. But the distance between where it was generated and the obstacle it meets is equal to the distance it's going to take to come back, unless, of course, there's another interruption that is introduced in the path. All things being equal, it's supposed to be that way. So ping is one of those utility tool that is available within the stack, and it sends traffic. And if it sends traffic, it is due to the service giver or the device or the target is service bound to respond in their architecture. So now an attacker can use this tool innocently, right? And is attempting to just reach you, and you respond, not knowing that this is the target, and it is actually eliciting your response, right? So these probes can use various protocols and multi-levels of aggressiveness, typically based on what is being scanned, when it's being scanned, and what for. So it is usually very aggressive, where a tool is used and it's typically targeting somebody. It's like trying to wake up something that is supposed to be quiet. Typically, the use is aggressive. Okay, it's not friendly. Then there's a passive reconnaissance, which is more or less a method of gathering information in which the tool do not interact directly with the target device or the network. So what do I mean? For example, I can actually install a third-party application whose job is to just to sieve information exchange from a third party or from another device which is not yours. Okay, let me paint it this way. Say, for example, I'm looking for information. I'm sweeping through everything. You're on social media. You're on perhaps even, let's say, LinkedIn, for example. I could post a link soliciting for job placement. Say, I require somebody with X kind of skill to feel this is not me aggressively doing gathering of information. It's just me putting something out there and with the hope that whoever is very interested will respond. And here's one thing I observed too, which part of what I read. When people are seeking enrollment, they are usually very flamboyant with their how do I put it, submissions. What I mean is somebody can tell you, from what is, for the past 4 years, I've been doing this and doing that. I have this qualification, went to that. Now, all of this is giving me information of this. That's for connecting to or seeking employment to certain places. But you can imagine if it's like an application, right, that is online. You could be on social media. People do a lot of stuff, posting stuff that don't have any business posting on social media, right? I could be doing something very serious and then put it there. I'm here, I'm there. With a lot of geotagging happening and meta information involved in information that we send, I can gather a lot of stuff. I had one very funny incident one time. There was someone that was tracking, not like tracking like we're doing some security stuff. Person traveled, snapped a picture. Person traveled. And I asked, where did you go to? The person said, oh, well, I went to so and so place. I went for so and so event, and sent me a picture. And by the time I checked the picture, this thing happened in 2019. The picture the person sent to me was taken in 2017 from the information I was able to gather from that picture. Okay. So passive reconnaissance is just simply getting information, but it's just indirectly with the target device. That's the focus. So there are multiple methods of passive reconnaissance, some involving using third-party database to gather information. Others also use tools in such a way that they will not be detected by the target. These tools work by simply listening to the traffic on the network and using intelligence to deduce information about the device communication on the network. So one of the most important aspects of learning about penetration testing is developing a good methodology. Let me add, hopefully, we fall into the category of people who develop tools to be used. Because just like going to any restaurant, if you are not the one who is cooking the food, then whatever you're eating, whatever you're eating is whatever you're eating, right? So The best way to actually determine a tool's particular response or action is that you develop the tool. Thank God for open source. People can actually script and develop stuff for themselves. So basically here, you're looking at developing a good methodology that will help you select the appropriate tool and technologies to use during the engagement of reconnaissance. So common active reconnaissance tools methods include the following: host enumeration, network enumeration, user enumeration. Again, remember, this is targeting host, targeting network, targeting users, targeting groups, targeting network share, web page, application, service, packet, and so on. Packet crafting. There's a tool, I think it's listed in your curriculum. I can't remember where it is. Let me find out. I think it is